I remember the moment it happened, 4:30 in the morning, the gym completely empty, just the sound of my heartbeat and the ball hitting the hardwood floor. 2,000 shots before dawn, every single day. Not because someone was watching, not because it was expected, but because I understood something most people never grasp. Greatness isn't born. It's forged in the darkness, long before anyone's watching. You've heard of the Mamba mentality. You've seen the championships, the 81-point game, the final 60-point farewell. But what you haven't seen, what most people never see, is the true price of relentless pursuit. The mornings when my alarm would sound at 3:30 and every fiber of my being screamed for more sleep. Those moments of choice that define who you become. I wasn't always Kobe Bryant, the Black Mamba. I was once just a kid with a dream bigger than my circumstances. The son of a professional basketball player who moved us from Philadelphia to Italy when I was 6 years old. An outsider who didn't speak the language, who found solace in the universal rhythm of the bounce, bounce, release. The ball became my voice when words failed me. When we returned to America, I was different. While other teenagers worried about fitting in, I was obsessed with standing out, not through flash or style, but through raw, undeniable excellence. I'd watch old footage of Jordan for hours, not just his highlights, but his misses, his recoveries, the subtle adjustments between plays. I wasn't watching basketball. I was studying the architecture of greatness. The truth that nobody wants to hear is that talent is overrated. I've seen talented players come and go, natural gifts that withered because they lacked the one thing that matters more than ability, an uncompromising spirit. What separates the good from the great isn't what you can do on your best day. It's what you demand of yourself on your worst day. People often ask me, when the Mamba mentality was born, they're looking for a dramatic origin story, some pivotal game or career-defining moment. But it wasn't like that. The Mamba wasn't born in the spotlight. It was cultivated in those pre-dawn hours when the only witness to my commitment was my own reflection in the gym windows. It was nurtured through the pain of 10,000 repetitions, through the doubt that visits every dreamer, through the criticism that meets anyone who dares to be different. The hardest thing about excellence isn't the work, it's the consistency. Anyone can push themselves to the limit once. Few can do it daily, yearly, for decades. When your muscles are screaming and your lungs are burning and your mind is begging for relief, that's when character reveals itself. That's when you discover what you're truly made of. I can still feel the texture of the ball in my hands during those solitary sessions. The way the leather gripped my fingertips, the perfect release, the beautiful rotation. I can still hear the particular sound it made when the shot was pure, different from when it was slightly off. These weren't just physical sensations. They were a language, a conversation between my body and the game I love, between my limitations and my potential. What most people don't understand about relentlessness is that it's not about never falling. It's about how you rise. I tore my Achilles tendon during a game against the Warriors in 2013. Felt the pop, knew immediately what had happened. Most players would have been carried off the court. Instead, I stood up, walked to the free throw line, made both shots, and then walked myself to the locker room. Not as a show of bravado, but because that's who I had decided to be long before that moment arrived. The art of living relentlessly isn't about basketball. It isn't even about success as most people define it. It's about becoming the architect of your own life rather than a guest within it. It's about setting standards for yourself that seem unreasonable to others but essential to you. It's about understanding that your greatest opponent will never be the person across from you. It will always be the voice within you that whispers, enough. The greatest misconception about success is that your primary competition exists outside of you. They told me my rivals were Jordan, LeBron, Durant. They were wrong. My true opponent was always within. The doubt, the comfort, the human tendency towards satisfaction. These are the real adversaries of greatness. I still remember my first championship, the parade, the adoration, the validation of everything I had sacrificed. Most players would have savored that moment, perhaps eased off the throttle for just a little while. The next morning, at 4 a.m., I was back in the gym. Not because I didn't appreciate the victory, but because I understood something fundamental about human nature. Success makes most people soft. It causes them to expand their comfort zone rather than push beyond it. You see, discipline isn't about punishment, it's about freedom. True freedom. The freedom to become the person you decided to be rather than the one circumstance would make you. People watched me train and said, "Kobe, you're obsessed." I never corrected them. But obsession implies something unhealthy, something out of control. What I cultivated was focus, absolute clarity of purpose. The difference between obsession and focused determination is simply this. One controls you, the other you control. The hardest battles weren't in the playoffs or the finals. They were on random Tuesday mornings in February, when my alarm would ring and I'd need to choose again between comfort and growth. Between what felt good and what would make me better, I'd sometimes lie there, tempted to hit snooze, to give myself permission to rest. In those moments, I'd ask myself, what would the player I want to become do right now? The answer was always the same, and so my feet would hit the floor. I learned to embrace discomfort the way most people embrace comfort. To see it not as something to avoid, but as the only path to becoming the version of myself I had imagined. Pain became information. Fatigue became a threshold to break through. Doubt became fuel. This isn't masochism, it's transformation. The understanding that growth and comfort never coexist. Critics called me difficult. Teammates sometimes resented my demands. Coaches occasionally struggled with my intensity. I never apologized for my standards. Not because I believed I was perfect. I knew better than anyone how far from perfect I was. But because I understood that excellence isn't a destination you reach and then relax. It's a constant becoming, an endless refinement. I remember a practice session before the 2010 finals. I stayed for hours after everyone had left, working on a single move, a counter to a defensive scheme we'd seen from Boston. I made that same move hundreds of times until it was embedded, not just in my muscle memory, but in my very nature. The game arrived, the moment presented itself, and the move emerged, not as a thought, but as an instinct. That's what relentlessness creates. The transformation of conscious effort into unconscious excellence. The Mamba mentality was never about basketball. It was about the approach, the process, the willingness to look in the mirror and say, I can be better and I'm willing to do what others won't to get there. This isn't just for athletes. This is for anyone who refuses to accept mediocrity from themselves. Anyone who understands that your life's work isn't what you do, but who you become while doing it. The battle within never ends. That's the beautiful struggle of living relentlessly. There is no finish line, no point at which you've made it. There is only the next challenge, the next evolution, the next opportunity to transcend your previous limitations. The question isn't whether you'll face resistance, internal or external. The question is what you'll do when it arrives. I've never been afraid of failure. I've been afraid of not trying, of leaving potential untapped, of wondering, what if? Fear of failure keeps you comfortable. Fear of regret keeps you moving forward. Choose your fears wisely, because they will either imprison you or propel you. The battle within isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming complete, about aligning who you are with who you're capable of being. That's the true victory. That's the art of living relentlessly. 5 a.m., my shoes squeaking against the empty court, the rhythmic bounce of the ball, the net snapping as another shot falls through. This wasn't practice in the conventional sense. This was communion, a daily conversation between myself and my craft. You want to know the secret to mastery? Fall in love with the minutiae. The details that others consider tedious, you must find fascinating. I studied the game like it was sacred text, not just the obvious elements Shooting, passing, defense, but the subtle ones. The footwork of Hakeem Olajuwon, the body positioning of Jordan, the court vision of Magic. I would watch film for hours, identifying micro movements, weight transfers, eye placements that created advantages measured in milliseconds and millimeters. Excellence lives in these margins. Most players practice until they get it right. I practiced until I couldn't get it wrong. There's a profound difference. The first is about achievement. The second is about identity, about making excellence so ingrained that it becomes not what you do, but who you are. I didn't want to perform at a high level occasionally. I wanted performance to be inseparable from existence. People often ask about the famous story, how I stayed after a finals loss to work out in the opposing team's arena until early morning. They missed the point of that moment. It wasn't about punishing myself for losing. It wasn't even about getting better, though that was always the outcome. It was about honoring a covenant I had made with myself long ago, that regardless of external results, I would never betray my internal standards. The craft demands consistency, not just when the lights are bright and the stakes are high, but in those quiet moments when no one is watching. When I injured my shooting hand, I didn't take time off. I worked on my left. When my legs were too sore to run, I refined my footwork. When I couldn't sleep, I visualized. Every obstacle became a pathway to a new dimension of skill. Every limitation an invitation to expand in a different direction. What people call talent is often just love made visible. Love for the process, love for the struggle, love for the journey of becoming. I didn't just want to excel at basketball. I wanted to understand it completely, to see its patterns, its language, its hidden architecture. This kind of deep knowledge doesn't come from casual engagement. It comes from obsessive attention, from devotion. The summer of 2007, I decided my defensive footwork needed refinement. So I studied videos of cheetahs hunting, their efficiency, their patience, their explosive timing. I spent weeks transforming animal movements into basketball applications. People thought this was excessive. I thought it was necessary. The border between ordinary and extraordinary is rarely crossed through conventional means. True craftsmanship isn't about perfection. It's about the constant pursuit of it, knowing full well it's unattainable. That's the beautiful paradox. You aim for what can never be fully reached. And in that reaching, you discover versions of excellence you couldn't have imagined otherwise. My 81-point game wasn't the culmination of ambition. It was a checkpoint in an endless journey. There were games when everything flowed effortlessly. It seemed enormous and time moved at my command. People call this the zone or flow state, but these moments weren't accidents or mystical occurrences. They were the natural outcome of thousands of hours of deliberate preparation meeting opportunity. Luck favors the prepared. Magic favors the obsessed. The craft taught me patience, not the passive patience of waiting, but the active patience of building, brick by brick, rep by rep, day by day, understanding that mastery isn't achieved in grand dramatic moments, but in the accumulation of consistent, focused effort. The shot that wins the championship isn't made in the final seconds of the fourth quarter. It's made at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday, 6 months earlier when no one is watching. The beauty of devotion to craft is that it transforms not just your skill, but your perception. You begin to see details invisible to others. Patterns emerge from chaos. Opportunities reveal themselves within constraints. The game slows down while your mind speeds up. This isn't just about basketball. It's about the elevated consciousness that comes from complete immersion in anything worthy of your full attention. The measure of a person isn't found in their victories. It's revealed in how they respond when everything falls apart, when the crowd turns against you, when your body betrays you, when doubt isn't just a visitor, but takes up residence in your mind. These are the moments that define you, not because they're fair, but because they're inevitable. The 12th of April, 2013, The moment I felt my Achilles tear, the sickening pop, the sudden absence of connection between mind and body. Standing at the free throw line, I knew my season was over, possibly my career. Everything I had worked for hanging by a literally severed thread. In that moment, you discover who you truly are, not who you aspire to be, not who others believe you to be, but your authentic self, stripped of everything except choice. People remember that I made both free throws before walking off the court under my own power. What they don't understand is that this wasn't heroics. It wasn't even about basketball anymore. It was about honoring a principle I had lived by. Finish what you start, regardless of circumstance. The easy path is always available, always tempting, always justified by reasonable excuses. The relentless path is about rejecting that invitation to surrender, even when surrender makes perfect sense. Adversity introduces you to yourself, the real you, not the highlight reel version that exists when everything is going well, but the person you become when the script gets shredded, when the plan fails, when reality doesn't conform to your expectations. This is when character ceases to be theoretical and becomes practical. The darkest period of my career wasn't the injury itself. It was the rehabilitation, the solitary hours of painful incremental progress, the doubt that would visit at 3 a.m, the legitimate question of whether the mountain was worth climbing again. I was 34 years old. I had nothing left to prove. No one would have blamed me for walking away. These are the moments when your why must be stronger than your why not. I've studied greatness across disciplines, in art, in business, and science. The common thread isn't talent or opportunity or luck. It's relationship with adversity. Average people see hardship as punishment to be avoided. Exceptional people see it as tempering to be embraced. The fire that threatens to destroy you is also the fire that forges you. The choice is not whether you will face the fire. The choice is what you become in response to it. The Colorado situation in 2003 to 2004 nearly destroyed everything. My marriage, my career, my reputation. I would drive to the arena not knowing if I would be booed by my own fans. I would board the team plane straight from court hearings. I would practice while headlines questioned not just my judgment, but my character. During this period, basketball became more than a game or a profession. It became sanctuary. The one place where complexity distilled into clarity, where chaos yielded to control. What I learned through public scrutiny was the power of present focus. When the noise became deafening, I narrowed my vision to what was directly in front of me. The next play, the next practice, the next opportunity to lose myself in the work. Not as escape, but as reconnection to essence. When everything external feels uncertain, anchor yourself in process, in what you can influence, in what remains within your control. The injuries that define my later career, the broken finger, the knee issues, the shoulder pain, were teachers disguised as obstacles. Each limitation forced adaptation. Each setback required reinvention. I couldn't jump as high, so I refined my footwork. I couldn't rely on speed, so I developed more cunning. What seemed like decline became evolution. This isn't optimism, it's strategy. The understanding that obstacles don't appear in your path to stop you. They appear to show you a new path. Here's what most people miss about resilience. It's not about bouncing back to who you were. It's about growing into who you're capable of becoming. The goal after falling isn't to return to the previous height. It's to reach a new one, to transform the energy of disappointment into fuel for evolution. I didn't want to recover from my Achilles injury. I wanted to emerge from it with new capabilities, new understanding, new appreciation for the game that had given me everything. The ultimate test isn't whether you can avoid adversity. It's whether you allow it to define you or refine you, whether it becomes conclusion or curriculum. The fire that forges or the fire that consumes. The same heat, but vastly different outcomes. This choice, this response, is the heart of living relentlessly. Not just pushing when the path is clear, but especially when it isn't. Not just moving forward when motivated, but precisely when motivation has abandoned you and only commitment remains. My final game, 60 points, the perfect conclusion to a 20-year story. The crowd chanting, the celebrities watching, the world witnessing one last performance. But what I remember most isn't the scoreboard or the spotlight. It's what happened before anyone arrived. 5 hours before tip-off, I was on the court, alone. One last communion with the game that had shaped me. One final conversation with the empty arena that would soon bear witness to an ending disguised as a beginning. Legacy isn't what you leave behind when you're gone, it's what you build within others while you're here. The championships matter, the accolades matter, but they're artifacts, not essence. What remains when the buzzer sounds for the final time isn't statistics or highlights, it's impact, the lives you've touched, the standards you've established, the permission you've granted others to pursue their own excellence without apology. After retirement, people expected me to stay connected to basketball, to coach or commentate or own a team. But I understood something that wasn't immediately obvious. The Mamba mentality was never about basketball. Basketball was simply the canvas I was given, the medium through which I expressed a philosophy of living, an approach to existence that transcended any single domain. I found my way to storytelling, to business, to supporting my daughter's journeys, not as reinvention, but as continuation. Different arenas, same mindset, different challenges, same approach. The relentlessness that defined my athletic career simply found new expressions, new opportunities to pursue mastery, new domains in which to apply the principles that had never been confined to the court. The Oscar I won for Deer basketball meant something different than the championship rings. Not more or less, but different. It represented the transfer of passion. The understanding that what drove me wasn't basketball itself, but the pursuit of excellence within it. When that same drive found new channels, new outlets, new forms of expression, I knew the journey had never really been about the game. It had always been about the approach. Many athletes struggle with retirement because they've confused the vehicle with the destination. They believe they love the sport, when what they actually love is the challenge it provides. The opportunity for mastery it offers, the version of themselves it demands they become. When you understand that these opportunities exist everywhere, retirement ceases to be an ending. It becomes a pivot. The greatest gift I received wasn't talent or opportunity or platform. It was clarity of purpose. The understanding that life is too short for half measures, too precious for mediocrity, too sacred for hesitation. Whether on the court or in the boardroom, with my family or my foundations, the question remained the same. What does excellence look like in this moment, and am I willing to pursue it without compromise? I look at my daughters and see the future, not just my future or their future, but the expansion of possibility, the continuation of a mindset that transcends individual achievement. Gianna had the same fire, the same drive, the same unapologetic pursuit of her own greatness. Watching her develop wasn't just pride, it was recognition. The understanding that what matters most isn't what you accomplish, but what you inspire. If I could leave you with one truth, one principle that defined not just my career, but my understanding of living purposefully, it would be this. Comfortable mediocrity is the enemy of meaningful excellence. The world will always encourage you to settle, to compromise, to find the reasonable middle ground between aspiration and effort. Resist this invitation with everything you have. Not because balance isn't valuable, but because the balance point between greatness and average always tilts toward average unless consciously corrected. The Mamba mentality isn't a destination you reach. It's a constant becoming, a daily recommitment to growth over comfort, to standards over norms, to the extraordinary over the acceptable. It's available to anyone with the courage to prioritize who they might become over who they currently are, to value potential over safety, to choose the harder right over the easier wrong, not once in a moment of inspiration, but consistently in the quiet decisions that shape a life. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes on and off the court. I pushed too hard sometimes, expected too much, but I never apologized for the pursuit itself, for the relentless commitment to excellence that defined not just what I did, but who I became. That's the final truth of living relentlessly. It's not about achieving perfection. It's about the transformative power of the pursuit itself. The clock runs out for everyone eventually. The final buzzer will sound, the lights will dim. What remains isn't the points you scored or the records you broke. What remains is who you became through the pursuit, the lives you touched, the standards you established, the permission you gave others to pursue their own greatness without reservation or apology. That's not just a career, that's a legacy. That's not just a game plan, that's a life philosophy. That's not just the Mamba mentality, that's the art of living relentlessly. And it's available to anyone with the courage to choose it, not just once, but every day. Not just in victory, but especially in defeat. Not just when it's easy, but precisely when it's hardest. This is my story. What will yours be?